whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind.
It was basically a cube with inside of a sphere where the points of the cube were touching the outside of the sphere.
Roger. There's troubleshooting machines out here.
So this isn't anything that just is limited to the United States. It's a worldwide phenomenon.
Hello and welcome everyone to the first ever episode of That UFO Podcast. My name is Andy and I'm the host of this show, delving into the world of UFOs, UAP, aliens, extraterrestrials, ultra-terrestrials and more. Since I was a kid, I've been interested in many different mysteries and incredible possibilities in the world. Things like remote viewing, time travel, psychic abilities, but among all of these, UFOs and all that entails is what's really had my attention the most. My aim with this show is to share the latest UFO news and opinion from around the world, and right now there's certainly plenty of that. I'll also bring on a range of credible, knowledgeable guests to discuss their own stories and experiences for you to listen to and form your own opinions. I want to get straight into one huge piece of breaking news from this week. Well, maybe for many of us it wasn't news, but the weight that's added to a story that was already out there is definitely credible. I'm going to first read the Pentagon Department of Defence statement that was released. The Department of Defence has authorised the release of 3 unclassified Navy videos, one taken in November 2004 and the other 2 in January 2015, which have been circulating in the public domain after unauthorised releases in 2007 and 2017. The US Navy previously acknowledged that these videos circulating in the public domain were indeed Navy videos. After a thorough review, the department has determined that the authorised release of these unclassified videos does not reveal any sensitive capabilities or systems and does not impinge on any subsequent investigations of military airspace incursions by unidentified aerial phenomena. Department of Defence is releasing the videos in order to clear up any misconceptions by the public on whether or not the footage that has been circulating was real or whether or not there is more to the videos. The aerial phenomena observed in the videos remains characterised as unidentified. That's the statement released by an official government organisation. So these videos were initially leaked or released in December 2017 after the New York Times published front page news revealing the US government did indeed have an interest in UFOs, despite years of denial, mockery, and they even had a programme with a budget going well into the tens of millions of dollars, and that's what we know about, not the black money that would go on in the background as well. Since then, pilots, radar operators and many more have come forward to share their own first-hand accounts of what they saw out at sea, in the air and on the land. Can you imagine 10 years ago being told the US government would admit to having a UFO study programme and release official footage of these incredible craft performing amazing physics-defying feats? You'd be fair in thinking that would be it. That would be disclosure, something we all want. Finally, the powers that be have admitted something we've all known for a long, long time. Yet, here we are, still picking at the details, questioning the timing, seeing it mocked in some areas of the media. The reasoning behind it, is there an agenda? Who knows, and that's something we're going to look into more and more. The main thing for now is the argument and evidence is once again back in the mainstream press, with news outlets around the world reporting on these stories from witnesses that are some of the most highly trained and reliable people on the planet, and they're reporting them in a serious manner as well, something that's not always done, particularly when it comes to UFOs. The timing of this first show could not be any better with the events of this week. I've got a guest who was one of the first people to witness some of these incredible craft, vehicles, whatever these things are, back in November 2004. And after the break, you'll hear Gary Voorhis, radar operator of the USS Princeton, tell his story and discuss his thoughts, feelings and opinions of what happened on those days where the US Navy encountered objects of unknown origin out at sea and were left feeling incredibly inept against their capabilities. Firstly, I'm going to play a small plug for a friend of the show, and then I want you to stick around because when we come back, Gary's going to tell you his amazing tale. Thanks for listening to That UFO Podcast.
Spooky greetings, everybody. My name is Tessa Morrow. I am a paranormal investigator, an author, and I have Paranormal Prowlers podcast. So be sure to venture on over, check it out. It's all things super scary, spooky, supernatural, paranormal, bizarre and unknown and unexplained. And on that podcast, you will hear several different encounters and experiences and investigations and hear all about haunted locations. And also, besides myself, I have awesome guests that join me from time to time, just like Andy. So please be sure to check out Paranormal Prowlers podcast. Have a spooky day.
Coming back from that message, we have a man who almost needs no introduction. It's going to be the first guest on that UFO podcast. We've got Gary Voorhis. Gary, how are you?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm very well, man. Thank you very much. It's a very cold night here in the northeast of England, but the stars are out, so it's clear skies. Good for a bit of sky watching. What about yourself?
It's hot.
Hot and sunny. Where are you based again?
Florida.
Florida, very nice. And how's lockdown treating you over your way?
It's been it's fine for me. I'm more of I like to stay in anyways, so.
Yeah. See, I like to stay in, but now I don't have the choice. That's what kind of gets to me. I like to know I can go out, but I don't actually end up doing it. So, Gary, first off, you were a witness to one of the most significant UFO or UAP events in recent times, back in November 2004. What I'd like you to do is take us back to that day and walk us through what should have been your typical day. What did you expect to happen?
Well, I know, like, the first day I found out, I was on a mid-watch, which would be the late-night shift watch, and wait for somebody to actually need something from the computer technician. A lot of waiting around, a lot of sitting around waiting, sitting on watch, just, listening to things, because the watch I did was AWS, Air Warfare. And it was just a monitoring watch for the computer room. We had a bunch of people on AWS and just in different places, different spaces throughout the ship. And so my typical day would have been pretty mundane. Would have been probably exciting if you had never been on a ship. But after that, at that point, I'd already been on 2 deployments. So, it's an old hand at everything going on.
So you were pretty experienced. Yeah, you weren't expecting anything out of the ordinary at that point, I take it.
Oh, yeah. Our ship had been heavily involved in Iraqi freedom, enduring freedom, and a lot of the conflicts that had happened prior. So I had quite a bit of experience operating all the systems.
Cool. And I suppose going back to that time, 2004, there had been conflicts previous and some still to come. So it was still a very active time for you, I take it, yeah?
Oh, yeah. It's at that point we were just doing workups, so like our spaces and things like that, they're once everything's running, you shouldn't be needed. You shouldn't. There's no need other than just maybe flipping some data recording tapes or putting in some new tapes, or kind of just the monotonous, mundane things that you just got to do to keep things up and running. But once they're up and running, there shouldn't be much that you have to do. You should be pretty much dying of boredom.
And on that day, that is definitely not what happened by the sounds of it. So you're expecting this mundane day. You wake up a bit cranky. You're expecting just to go through the motions. It's drills, from what I understand, from a limited, almost non-existent military knowledge. To be honest, most of my military knowledge comes from listening to some of your interviews on various other podcasts. So I won't even try and work out the lingo. So take us through what did happen on the day. When did things start getting interesting back in that November 2004?
Well, the day that things started to happen really was more of a technical day. It really wasn't God, here's, UFOs. It was, I remember because I'd woken up, it was really cranky and grumpy, went up to the smoke break. I was out of cigarettes and had no money for any more cigarettes. So I kind of had to hang out there for a second until somebody came out there that could maybe provide me with a cigarette. Everybody that knows me is about to laugh their ass off when you hear that. And But and I was talking to one of the spy technicians, the actual spy technicians, because there's a group of guys that's their whole job is just to take care of that one Aegis system. We all work together. I worked with the computer systems that run all the data recording. My systems are basically the mainframes for all of those systems. So my aspect was computer, and so one of the spy guys. So when I say spy guys, it's one, and we're all a tight knit group. So we all work on each other's gear. We all work on, they come down when they need the computers reset, or if they need diagnostics run, or things of that nature. Generally, when they're running all of their diagnostics, I'm having to stand by, or somebody's having to stand by in Computer Central to reset the mainframe over and over again until they get all of their settings right.
Okay, and can I just double check that this incident we're about to discuss is famously known as the Nimitz or the Tic Tac incident, but you were actually based on the USS Princeton, is that correct?
That is correct. Our ship was called providing air defense for the carrier, and okay. we were basically we ride alongside shotgun of the carrier, and we provide air defense for them, meaning that if anything comes into our airspace that's hostile or anything like that, or surface or air, we're going to engage it before the carrier does. Carrier's priority is to launch and recover aircraft, not actual combat itself. I mean, it has the limited capability of combat, but our ship was literally designed for combat. So it's, we think of us as the soldier ship.
Yeah, and you're out there basically expecting a simulation of a combat situation. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, what was described to me is that we had a bunch of unknown objects that they wanted to make sure wasn't just some type of clutter. Not that the system's actually ever really messed up that often, but when you got something like that, you don't want to just run out and say, hey, we got UFOs. You want to make sure everything is working, because if it comes back that something went down or something wasn't working right before you reported all that stuff, it probably would have been hell to pay.
And it's funny that you say you don't want to run out and say, oh, it's UFOs. Is that ever something you'd come across before? And I do mean in the sense of this is an aircraft that we don't know what it is.
I don't think any of us really thought it was clutter. There was a little bit of clutter, and clutter generally doesn't look like these like a track come and go. It's not like a solid track, or it'll be just like barely a track. It won't hardly come in with a resolution enough to do it. And what those are is actually peaks on the waves. Mm-hmm. That's how sensitive the system is. And so when we say we had to calibrate that system, it's not whether it worked or not. It's whether it was working too well or whether it was set too high. Because if it's calibrated too high, we can track a periscope breaking the surface of the water. I mean that's how precise the Spy 1 Bravo radar can actually be if it's not dialed in for its specific tasking.
And someone of your experience, like you've said before as well, like what you're looking at. You've seen if you've had a glitch before, and you've got a rough idea, surely.
Yeah, all the spy guys, all the watchstanders, all the guys that work on that radar on a regular basis, they'd all seen clutter plenty of times. Especially in high seas. Like if seas get real rough, you start getting 10-foot plus seas, you're going to get clutter because you're recording the wave crests. So it's that's what it's. See, the thing about spy is that all clutter is something. It's not that there's any like just a phantom. There's no phantom tracks. It's either something that we shouldn't be tracking and we have to filter it out, or it's an actual thing. In this case, it ended up being a lot of actual things.
Sure. So you're saying you're seeing this clutter on the screen, and your idea is, do you know what? I need to do something because there's hell to pay if I don't clean this up, and it is some kind of computer glitch in the background. But talk to us from there. Then what happened?
All right. So then we proceeded to get permission from the captain to go ahead and take those systems down. He got a general briefing of what's going on, and then not directly by me, by the way. I just want to make that clear. This would have all been going through the chain of command. So once that was all done, I'd get the word to stand by so that I could reset the computers, and those were some jargon for you. The Yuck 43 computers, which is what we were using. We were using off-the-shelf systems. It was a hybrid system and it was the baseline 6.1 Aegis system. And why that's significant is because it was the very first system that started using what's now, I don't know what it's known now as, but at the time was the Q70 system, which was moving from like the 60s and 70s technology of, hardwired mainframes to off-the-shelf server style fiber optics. It was a really advanced system, and ours was a hybridized bastard ship that had half legacy systems and half Q70 systems, which is why I was the only computer tech on board, because they had discontinued my NEC, my rate, because of these new systems. So all the computer techs that were in, that was the last 1144 computer techs there will ever be.
So you're going from almost the equivalent of dial-up internet going to a 5G in terms of some of the technology that you're replacing and moving about on these ships, yeah?
Yeah, that's probably a good jump. And then on top of that, we were pioneering some experimental systems that allowed all the ships to share sensor data, kind of like how you have these Wi-Fi mesh systems now, where they just they blanket the entire house,
yeah,
and then each one has its own range, and then together collectively it gives you your a big huge zone of Wi-Fi. Well, now equivalent that zone as like the zone of radar and sensor data that we're all combining together to see one big picture of what's going on around us.
And is that you talking as well to the other ships like the Nimitz and anyone else who was out there? You're all combining that blanket to cover what's out in the ocean, yeah?
Yeah, any of the ships or aircraft that had the CEC technology on board were a part of that system. That includes the Hawkeye, the Nimitz, and all of the other ships in the battle group.
Awesome. So you've got permission. You've taken down the systems. I take it you do some kind of cleaning, if that's the right word to use, rebooting them, starting them back up, and then you expect to either not see tracks, but in your experience, you're going to see these things again. You're just covering your own back, yeah?
Yeah, when we brought it back up, we still were getting these tracks. They were definitely 100% unknown tracks at this point. So at that point, it got a little exciting, but when you I originally heard of UFOs and how fast they go, and how it was just sitting there hovering, and then it went from hovering to I can't tell how fast it went because it just disappeared.
Yeah.
And these things were doing just kind of a consistent kind of drifting southwards towards San Clemente, and doing 100 knots, which is not a very fast for an aircraft. We're talking, balloon speed, also, ultralights. Generally a commercial aircraft is going to do 200 miles an hour just to get airborne. So for it to be doing 100 knots was, a little odd. And I remember us, we were talking about that, and it was like, well, I made the comment of, what are they, balsa wood flyers, or, so, what do we got, what's going on? And then, of course, because, I could see it in the watchstander's face. He had no idea, what he was looking at. I mean, they weren't, there's all kinds of transponders and equipment that help identify aircraft, all commercial aircraft, all military aircraft. They all have, indicators, visual, audio, and radio, or visual and audio indicators on who they are and what they are. And there's also even a system used called identification friend or foe. You'll hear people talk about it, say IFF. And what it is, it's just a signal that it shoots out that says who you are. That's all it does over and over again. It just pulses who you are. I'm, aircraft, light aircraft, 1111112226 heading, and then from there it'll generate where their heading is and how fast they're going, and then we can say, okay, that's just commercial, and then if they're too close to us or if they're running through the wrong airspace, they'll get a little warning, hey, go this way or go that way, and then all stuff that I never would have had to deal with on a daily basis until these unknown tracks came up. Going up and looking at them radar screens was definitely not on my agenda.
Do you know what, you make an amazing point, and it's something that this incident in particular, until this came up and we saw things like the Tic Tac video, the gimbal videos, the Go Fast videos, that I had never considered things being slow and UFOs being the same. You always think UFO is fast, it disappears, and it's when you talk about something going 100 knots, I used to think, well, something going slow, that's not interesting. But the fact is, and you find out from people like yourself and some of the people like Kevin Day and David Fravor that have been interviewed since, they talk about these things should fall out of the air. They shouldn't be able to go that slow. So it's that whole extreme of going from super fast speeds that are incredible and we can't do and the human body can't withstand to this thing shouldn't still stay in the air, like you say. Is it balsa wood? Is it a drone? Is it floating? And it's still managing to stay and do what it does. And obviously they go on to do some more incredible things as well. But yeah, so at this point, what's your initial thoughts? What are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking, well, it could be just about anything at this point. I was half expecting them to say that there was a group of hot air balloons, and this is the first, this is our first indications of these things. So, we really didn't do anything about them for quite a while.
Are you allowed to do anything about it though? Like in your position?
I think it would have to generally be the chain of command that really kind of determines whether or not we do something, because it didn't really feel like anybody was real worried about them at all. Like remember when we were in the Gulf, anything that vectors towards us or comes towards the surface or air, it's getting interrogated immediately. We're up, we got loaded weapons, everything's locked and loaded, just point ready to go just in case. And obviously off the coast of, our own country, doing a training mission with zero weaponry other than small arms, we're not expecting to do an interrogation, but just looking back on it, at the time, you don't really question what's going on. You're just kind of sitting there waiting, just waiting for what the chain of command is going to do. And I remember just kind of getting a little frustrated at a certain point, like, why aren't we doing anything about these things? But they weren't doing anything hostile. They weren't coming directly at the ships. They were just kind of drifting along with us and just kind of staying at a certain distance. And I mean, there was no particular distance. It's just they weren't vectoring straight at us. They weren't coming right at us. Like a missile or a hostile aircraft. I mean, they're generally going to fly right at you.
Okay, so at this point, you're expected to carry on with the simulation as is and just ignore these.
That's kind of what I feel like the chain of command decided to do, is just kind of ignore this situation and not be the battle group that tracked unknown aircraft.
Is that still that stigma though attached to it, do you think, as well, that I was going to maybe touch on a little bit later, but is that something that generally in that line of work that people go to, because you do still get the laughs and jokes and it's derisory that it's UFOs, it's aliens, and
well, you got, I guess you would have to say you got two camps. You got the people that are kind of making fun of the situation, and then you got the people that just straight up don't believe what's going on. They don't care what you say or what you do. And yeah, the stigma is still there. For the surface guys like me, guys that work inside the skin of the ship, work on weapon systems, stuff like that, none of us give a crap whether you think, whether we saw aliens or not. But for, nobody's going to have to give me a psychological profile to run my $1 billion weapon system where, a pilot, he comes back down saying he's seeing weird stuff. Well, the first thing they're going to do is give him a psych eval,
Right.
So
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a big difference between the worlds of Fravor and the worlds of Gary Voorhis, the mundane computer tech sitting in an air-conditioned space with his feet up, waiting for something to happen.
I totally see where you come from, but the more the stories come out, they've absolutely both got their place. And yeah, it's not a dogfight with something dropping from 80,000 feet and twisting back and forward at you, but I say it's quite incredible part of the story that you've witnessed. Obviously, is there. So, is there anyone else in the room with you just before we move on that was also seeing the same thing as you? At this point, you're told to carry on, but have you got someone sitting next to you that you're making eye contact and going?
Well, I would talk to the watchstanders. You got to remember my computer room with my computer with all the mainframes and stuff is a separate space from Combat Central, which is what you would see in the movies with the big screens and all the radars and stuff like that. So I would actually have to go up one deck and then go. It's literally right above my space, but it's kind of like think of an apartment building, and it's literally the apartment right above. If I hit my broom on the roof, they're going to hear it. Not
sure.
right,
okay.
But, yeah. you get the point. So I have to go up a set of stairs, and then combat's right there. And I had full access to combat. So and during non-combat situations, it's no big deal as long as you're as long as there's not a million people in combat. If it's just one guy and I'm up there bullshitting with a watchstander or something like that, it's never a big deal as long as they're still doing their job. So, I'd go up there, talk to the guys, say, hey, you still got that track, or I'd look at the console itself and try to find out where the bearing is. And, throughout the week, if I thought it might be close enough to see on the big eyes, I'd go try to see it. And sometimes I'd see things, sometimes I wouldn't. Not really at a distance to be, writing home about, but, it was an object moving weird at a distance that, and bearing that it was, same as where the object was or should be from where I saw it on the radar. So I got a little excited about that because that's. And then after the interrogation, that was like whoa. I got to see when I saw the interrogation video, I was just like, I remember that realization, and that it's like when your hands feel like they just went instantly cold, and your brain goes a little numb, and it's just like you go into shock just a little bit for like, oh my God, is there something bad going to happen from this? Are we all going to get lined up and shot? Am I supposed to be watching this? And so but then it kind of passed, real quick, and then just like, all right, well, I need to go get a zip drive and get a copy of this, and of course. After we watched it twice, and I got back to my space and went back to where I was watching the video, it was already gone. So,
and I just want to touch on that then. So, firstly, just to take you back a step, when you talk about the big eyes, so you've seen it on radar. That's the kind of end of that for you because you're not taking any more action as far as it's concerned. The big eyes, for layman's terms, that's just a big set of binoculars on top of the ship. You can look into the distance on. Is that right?
That is correct.
Cool. And you're saying you don't see much to write home about, but enough to get excited. Like, what do you see?
So at night, you'll definitely see a lit object. During the day, it would be a bright object still, but it wouldn't. It's not as visible during the day, and it would kind of look like a dark speck. If it was a nice day, you could see them if it was close enough. But out of probably the dozens and dozens of times that I tried to see him, I may have only got to see him maybe 3 times.
And how was it moving? Was it just sitting there? Could you make out any movement at that distance? Or
when I saw it at night a couple of times, I was able to really kind of see it. During the day, unless it was sitting still and then it moved a little bit, you really wouldn't notice it that much, not from the distances we were at. But I got to see it, not in any, like I said, any great real detail. Just know that there's a dark object there, and I know what it is. And, but I was kind of hoping it would come closer. It's
Absolutely.
Like, I can literally remember at one point at night, I was up there, and nobody else was up there. It was windy as hell. It was just kind of a crappy night for weather. It was clear, but it was windy, and when it's really windy, you don't really want to be out on the skin of the ship while we're trugging along.
Yeah.
up, especially where the big eyes is. It's real windy. I can remember looking through that thing and just like almost like wishing that it would just come closer so I could see exactly what you look like.
Yeah, and that's totally natural as well. And just to prefix a question I'm going to ask, did you have a belief in, just to say, aliens, UFOs, UAPs, extraterrestrials, whatever this might be beforehand? Or is this something that changed your thinking?
Well, I don't think it really ever changed my thinking. I think it definitely changed my perspective on what is possible. I've always been, more skeptical of everything, more of a skeptical believer. It's like UFOs are cool, werewolves are cool, but until I see one, they really aren't real. It's just a great story. Basically until you see one, everybody else has mental illness.
Yeah. And so at the time you're seeing this object, what would your thoughts have been? Like, what do you think it is? Is it just something that, wow, that's cool, or is your mind kind of wandering? Or
well, I remember, how does it work? How can it move like that? How can it possibly be what we're how is this thing doing the things that it's doing? How is it going from, like 28,000 feet to sea level in seconds? How is it moving from one point in the sky to another point in the sky in a way that when you're looking at it, like there was the one time when I really got to see it move on the horizon was at night, and it moved from one point to another. And I remember not realizing it moved at first because of how fast it moved. And then I was like, well, maybe it was a different object. And then no, sure enough, it wasn't. So it was just the same object. It had just moved from one point to another. And, it's like your brain took a second to really kind of grasp that it moved. It moved so fast.
And with the passing of time, has your opinion, from what you know then and what you know now, things you've experienced, and with 16 years, extra experience, if you want to call it that, on top, do you still think the same about it? Is there anything more you would add to that?
Well, I've played out a lot of different scenarios in my head. There's just so much unknown about everything about it. Really the only thing that I could take away is that there's technology that's either being carteled on our planet or not from our planet, and it's just, there's just not enough information in any way to really say 100% that this is alien, 100% this is the government. I've been approached by everybody under the sun, so people telling me that they're demons, and then they have conclusive proof. But anybody that comes at me that says they know 100% what everything is, I generally start with skepticism because I know I'm not anybody crazy important, but I worked on a lot of weapon systems, and I've got a lot of people around me that do know a lot of things, and none of them know what it is. I know people that make me feel stupid, and they have no idea what this is. So how does this this person that literally hasn't been anywhere, done anything, gonna know 100% sure that these are, aliens from Zeta Reticuli, and that,
Yeah.
So anybody that says they know for sure, I generally kind of dismiss until they give me real proof.
No, of course. And listen, I'll let my mind wander as fantastic as I can. But there comes a point you have to look and go, yeah, but is that, and the amount of people I follow on Twitter, and particularly recently, there's some sightings that's been on there, and you look and go, yeah, and I'd love to say that's an alien spacecraft, or I'd love to say that's even some kind of incredible US, Chinese, Russian piece of technology, but it clearly looks like it's probably a balloon, or do you know what? Someone's knocked it up on their PC in 5 minutes with CGI, and you still get those commenting that try and pass this off, and that never helps the situation. So I can totally appreciate that. One thing, just before I move on slightly, I want to take you back to, if you don't mind. It was the second point I wanted to make. So you mentioned about the radar data. You potentially wanted to take some of it on a zip drive and, for your own personal kind of reference in future. not to go back too much, but David Fravor has mentioned that he believes the data was more than likely deleted unintentionally. Whereas, am I right to say you've been quoted that a helicopter arrived on ship and then 20 minutes later the data was gone, so it was actually taken off the ship as far as you know?
Now, you got to remember that the data I'm talking about is radar tracks, radar data, environmental data, the stuff that basically everything that the Aegis weapon system and the CEC systems record, which is still, it's basically a three-dimensional picture of everything that went on if you have the right software to look at it.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what was taken from me. What was taken from David Fravor would have been his actual video, the FLIR video, the actual physical video. So, so you got two different, you got apples and oranges there, So it's
that's fair. Thanks for clearing that up. And can I just ask then? So that data being taken, is that normal practice? Or would you have expected that to still have been there? So what I'm trying to get is, I believe at one point you said men in suits. I don't want to say the words men in black because that's clearly, I think what a lot of people try to get at.
I refer to them as the men in khaki.
The men in khaki, right? Okay.
Because they were dressed averagely. They were guys, polos, khakis, blue jeans. They came aboard, windbreakers. They came aboard. 30 minutes later, I had to turn over all my tapes, and the helicopter left. My assumption is they took all the tapes and data. They were not on board the ship afterwards. So,
are you surprised at that, given what you saw, given what was recorded?
No. We had an incident where a aircraft went down during one of the deployments, and once that was done, we were told to mark the tape, mark which tapes would have recorded it and set them aside. And then they had people come aboard and take those, but it wasn't like this was. That was when we hit port again. There was somebody to take those tapes. There really wasn't a pressing matter. There wasn't somebody flying out to the ship to pick them up. They were doing an investigation, but we were in the Arabian Gulf, so we were in the middle of, destroying an entire country at the time. So it wasn't a priority.
There's been a bit of a gap now since that incident and leading up to the events that kind of got you coming out and starting to do interviews and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, basically that started back up in 2017 when the New York Times did the article about the Nimitz event, and David Fravor came out and about it, and publicly admitted that he basically got into it. I don't really consider it a dogfight, but a dogfight with an alien spacecraft. I think you would have to actually have a dog in that fight to have it a dogfight.
So yeah, I think I used the phrase dogfight earlier, and I think dogfight you're thinking Will Smith Independence Day. That's a dogfight. Yeah. Okay. So maybe more of an interaction.
To him, he's flying against an unknown aircraft. So for him, it is 100% a dogfight. He didn't stand a chance, but he was definitely flying, trying to find wing to no wing to this object, and it circles around him. So, and he was one of our best pilots. He was highly rated as a pilot. He had a crazy long service history. He had credentials. Up and down his sleeves, all across his chest, as far as the eye can see. We're not talking about some green pilot that just threw.
This is Tom Cruise and Top Gun you're talking about here. This is top of the class type guy. Yeah,
he's definitely a highly intelligent, articulate person that got where he got because of his skill set.
And you just mentioned there, Gary, so that this all kind of came about, and you've came to the forefront with some others since that New York Times article in December 2017. And when I say I've always had an interest in ufology and UFOs, this really ignited what I was interested in. And again, like it did for so many people as well. What were your thoughts when you saw those headlines and you saw what came out in the content?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I didn't see them. I didn't see anything until almost 2018. When I was contacted by a shipmate that everybody knows now.
Would that be Kevin Day?
That would be Mr. Kevin Day. he contacted me with a filmmaker that I had no idea who he was, Dave Beatty. And Dave Beatty, he said, hey, I got this guy, Dave Beatty. He'd like to do an interview with you if you're willing to talk. And, at first I was a bit hesitant to talk about it, because, classified information, it was a classified situation, so I wanted to make sure that I couldn't get in trouble for talking about it first. So I contacted some of my, people I worked with, because I remember signing something, and what it ended up being was just a chain of custody for my data recording tapes.
So did you think it was some kind of non-disclosure agreement that you shouldn't be talking about?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure what I signed wasn't like a non-disclosure or anything like that. But then I got confirmation that I definitely didn't sign any type of non-disclosure. So after that, I really didn't have a problem talking about it because most of the world's not going to believe you anyways. So what did it have to hurt to get the story out there and support my shipmates?
No, and it's been amazing that so many of you have came forward, and since then there are still people coming out, and again we can only hope more and more comes out and more incidents, to build on this, because so many kind of false dawns have happened where, not to use the D word, but like disclosure for whatever that is and what that means to different people.
See, there'll just never be the type of disclosure that everybody in this field wants. It's going to be trickled down. It's going to be filtered into our society. It'll be, when it's here, we won't know it's here because it would have already been integrated into our society. And,
the famous UFO landing on the White House lawn, I think, is what people think. That's what they would need. And let's be honest, I think there's still a lot of people, especially in today's society, that wouldn't believe it and still would think there was something to it. Can I just ask, Dave Beatty, you mentioned that was Dave Beatty was doing a documentary. Was that the Unidentified series that you got involved in?
No, I actually didn't get involved with To the Stars Academy and the History Channel until after we did the UFO Con. Actually, was it before or after? No, it was before. All right, so no, we filmed that before. But it was after they had gotten a hold of me, and then the History Channel got a hold of everybody else, and then they'd asked, and then I got a phone call from all of the top dogs in To the Stars Academy, trying to get me to do an interview, and I'm like, well, where are we going to do this interview? Because I can't leave, and so they end up doing that interview right in my house.
And for something I want to do later, I'll talk about. But are you talking about like your Lou Elizondo, Tom DeLonge, Chris Mellon?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I never got to talk to Tom DeLonge, but I did get to talk to Tom DeLonge one time. But I talked to him in 2003 on the end of our deployment. Matter of fact, it wasn't, but maybe a half a year before this event, him and his band did a USO concert on the Nimitz on our way back from deployment.
That's cool. So you got to see Blink 182.
Yeah. So I went to the carrier, got to see Tom DeLonge in concert, and then here I am, 17 years later, and the guy, his guy's organization's contacted me to talk about UFOs.
and he probably played a song, if you know them well enough, Aliens Exist, which is all about, the CIA and aliens and his beliefs and whatnot. So it's amazing what's happened. So can you talk to me a little bit about Unidentified, how that came about, getting involved with it, and your thoughts on To the Stars Academy?
Well, I don't have much of a thought about To the Stars. I don't really, honestly, I really don't care either way what they do. If they, I got a feeling that once they got the government back involved with their research, that it goes back to being hush-hush. It's just more of a, yes, we are working on it, but no, we can't talk about it. And that's, because there's nothing that the government's going to do or have its fingers in that's not classified while they're researching it. So.
Is that disappointing for you that they've went that way?
Like I said, if I was a part of that organization, it might be, but and in the future, if their organization ever actually wants to get involved with like UAPx, they've got the resources, but all resources come with strings. which is like why with our nonprofit, our board of directors, we decided that we would be donation only, and we would not let people actually invest into UAPx.
And I'm going to come on to UAPx actually in just a minute. I just want to get one more thought then on TTSA then. So with them going down the route of being involved with the government, so maybe you're not surprised. What if you were the government? Why do you want to bring a group like TTSA in-house like that? What would your thoughts be?
Well, I mean, look at the people that were involved. I mean, I remember looking up Chris Mellon for the first time and like, why the fuck is this guy coming out to talk to me? He's a bit more important than me.
Right.
You know, just the guy's title was more important than anything I've ever done in my life. So, you know, here are these people that like have this, these crazy credentials, and they're all talking to me like I'm, doing this, great service to the world. You know, it's like, it's hard to believe.
So, did you watch the series yourself? The 6 episodes?
Yes, I watched the series, like because Kevin Day, Sean Cahill, those guys are good buddies of mine. I remember me and Sean used to BS a lot on board when we were on deployment. So I mean I know all of those guys really well.
So it was more of a personal interest from that point of view rather than I wonder where this is going, and like you say, you maybe don't have that investment with them. It was more a case of it was something you were involved in from the instant standpoint. But
I'll honest with you, I'd be happy if they just came to my house, sat down, told me everything, and said, "Well, you just can't ever talk about it." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm good." Yeah,
fair enough, man. You've mentioned UAP Expeditions. Talk to me a little bit about that. Your involvement. I understand you're a vice president, is that right?
Yes, sir.
So a little bit about your involvement, your goals and aims, just to start with, please.
All right, so Kevin came to me a couple years ago with this idea of starting a nonprofit to go and try to research these objects that we saw. Well, at first it really was kind of not really going anywhere. So I'm like, yeah, no problem. And he goes, I need you to be the president, and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, is it only a name? Because I really just don't have time for this. I got a full-time job. I've got a family to deal with, to work, and I've got to have time for my family, time for work, and helping run a nonprofit takes a lot of time and effort. So I said, well, I'll be the vice president just so that I can take time off from it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. He goes, that works. So then we kind of had just that loose structure for a long time. And then now that things are starting to come together a little bit more, we've got a little bit of our infrastructure already set up for everything. We've got our game plan. We're going to go back out off the coast and near San Clemente. We've already got the areas the area that we're going to investigate already sectioned off. We're going to have two ships. We're going to go out there. We're going to check for every type of radiation. We're going to do we're going to do magnetics. We're going to check for gravity. We're going to do if there's a sensor that you can check for something, we are going to be able to. We're going to do a grid pattern across that entire area. We're going to do environmentals. We're going to do salinity tests. I mean, we're literally going to leave no stone unturned in that area to find out why that area is such a hot spot. And because after we did some investigation, we found out for over 100 years, the people that have lived all throughout there, the Baja Peninsula, and everything have been seeing, everything from orbs to just, to the same objects we saw to all kinds of weird phenomenon out in those waters, to stuff under the water too. So it's, fast moving objects zipping under the water, lit up, and granted, I have no idea what those could be, but it's still enough for us to want to heavily research that area. And that's our whole goal for now, is just to try to research that area, try to get some data, some hard data on something that's going on in that area. Maybe if we're lucky, we might even be able to actually film, record, and get some actual data on Tic Tacs too.
I've got a couple of questions that I've had a few people ask me to ask you.
All right.
And then I've got basically a quick fire to end on where I'm going to reach out a word or a name and just get your thoughts on it if you've got any, okay?
Sounds good.
So I've got Gareth has basically got in touch with two questions. And he's saying there's been so many sightings recently, especially celebrities getting involved in the kind of UFO field. If you've seen Logan Paul the last few days on Twitter, or Michelle Phelps, a boxing analyst, has posted a lot of videos on as well. Do you think it's only a matter of time before we do get any kind of smoking gun footage captured?
Well, unless we have networks of cameras set up, and there's actually a couple of companies that if you go to our website, sorry the name's just passing me up now, but they've actually partnered with us, and their whole goal is to set up these like observatories, these small observatories, these cameras, just to catch things in the sky. And I think until we get a big enough amount of people looking up, that we're not going to get any of this really good information that we really want to. I mean, the fact that, it's been just kind of written off for so long. Hi. My daughter saying hi.
That's all right. Say hi.
And, it's only going to be through that kind of research that we're going to be able to actually get that nice footage that we want. And even if you get that nice, clear, crisp footage, are we going to believe it?
Yeah.
We've been used to look at these fuzzy, grainy things and trying to interpret these pictures and these horrible flare videos and these super compressed garbage videos. So it's all of a sudden you get something super clear and it's like, oh, this is obviously fake. I mean, there's no way somebody's getting 4K video of this, and then of course 4K video looks fake.
Yeah, and that's something that really, really grinds with me is when you see what looks like a good piece of YouTube UFO footage, and it'll say something like the 1st of December 2019, Santiago, Chile, and someone's filmed it from their balcony, and you think, oh, that is really interesting, and they get a good zoom, and you see it's a minute and a half long, and at the end of the minute and a half, it cuts off, and you think, I want to see it leave. I want to see this thing shoot off and what that looks like, and it just always seems to cut off at the wrong bit. Now, I get why a Tic Tac or a gimbal video cuts off, because that's where we've been told it's to be cut off, and that's what we're allowed to see, so we don't get to see the good stuff, I suppose, if you want to call it that. But the raw footage that's taken by the public, that always disappoints me, that you don't get to maybe see. I get these things arriving because it's spontaneous, but you don't get to see maybe some of that stuff.
Then the other problem is just that, who's going to be set up to, produce a nice video of a UFO in an instant when it happens. I think that if I hadn't been, behind a radar screen and these things hadn't been floating out there for so long, that I don't think I would have been ready for it. I think if they had zipped by the ship, I would have just been like, whoa.
Yeah. I take it you've heard of Nick Pope.
Who?
Nick Pope.
Nick Pope?
Yeah. He does a lot of he's from Britain. He basically ran what you would call the X-Files for the Ministry of Defence in the UK.
All right.
So that very famously, that he was in a lot of papers, and he does a lot of work with movies and TV shows. He's on things like Ancient Aliens. Very intelligent guy. He doesn't give opinions, and he will never say something as an alien spacecraft or an alien's very clever. Very government-minded that way. We went to a talk. He lives in Los Angeles now, but he came to Berwick in the UK a couple of years ago as a one-off. He arranged a kind of lecture talk, and it was very informal, but it was really interesting. And he mentions that there is as he says, a rumour that there is a photograph in the UK Ministry of Defence that was taken by someone who was just photographing the landscape middle of the day in a very kind of hilly rural area in the UK. And basically it is a whatever type of fighter jet, I won't even hazard a guess at the number, F something no doubt, with this very clear UFO in front of it. This basically spacecraft flying through the hills middle of the day. And he says this picture, apparently you couldn't get any clearer. And it was sent into the Ministry of Defence anonymously by this photographer who was somewhere that just happened to be in a spot at a certain time taking a picture. and he sent this in with a message of, I shouldn't have this, thought you might be better off keeping it in a safe place. And he kind of mentioned that within the talk. And as you say, it's that sort of, even if that sort of photograph did surface, you would look at it and go, yeah, that's fake, that's too good.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because I mean, I'd be guilty of the first thing. You know, if something's too clear or too perfect, you know, I'm like, I'm like my skeptic vibe just pops. You know, I'm just like, you know, because I mean, I've seen so much stuff out there that's just, you know, maybe not obviously fake, but definitely not real, and just you know, kind of irritates me. You know, if you want to do something cool like that. That's fine, but just label it that. You know, hey, check out my fake UFO video. You know,
yeah, this is what I think they would look like. Yeah.
You know, or if you're gonna do just to see, you know, whether people would believe it or not, don't let it go on too long. You know, say, hey, check this video out, and then see, you know, for a couple of days how it goes, and then get on there and say, okay, yeah, I made this. You know, so
yeah,
you know, stuff like that, I don't really have a problem with, but. The people that, you know, try to pass the shit off as real and then, you know, run through conference after conference. And, you know, I mean, there's really no money to be made in this field. So I don't understand why people even try to bullshit this stuff.
Yeah, and it waters down the stuff that could be relevant or interesting or a really good discussion point. So Gareth had a second question. Do you think with us being kind of locked away just now across the world and nature kind of taking its charge, that this may lead to any more activity from kind of UFOs and whatnot?
I think indirectly. I don't think the activity is getting any more or less. I think just the amount of people on the planet is well, it's, you know, today is always the most people that have ever been on the planet.
Mm.
The only difference is now that might not be true because we have, you know, so many people dying right now.
Yeah,
and I don't say that lightly, but, you know, anytime you start getting ridiculously dense populations, it's been throughout entire history that bad things are going to happen. You know, diseases and things like of that nature. Nature always tries to balance itself out, whether it's through, you know, high strangeness and just a situation that you know, happens, or if it's, you know, man-made and just that's how it goes.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, I think it's just more people are home, more people are looking up, more people have more time. When you have more time, you think more. You know, and when you're thinking about it, then hey, I might step outside tonight and go ahead and look up for a little while, and then all of a sudden, hey, lo and behold, I saw something that didn't look like a satellite. You know, or you know, or
I'm lucky enough to live in a very kind of. It's a nice area. It's not a lot of light pollution. The skies, when they're clear, are really, really clear. And I've walked into countless branches, fences, walls, walking the dog, because I will look about constantly. And you do kind of see more things, and you get used to, there's the space station flying over, and I've got my apps that track the times. And now we've got Elon Musk's Starlink satellite train flying overhead.
That thing looks amazing when it goes across the sky. I mean, it really kind of... it blows your mind. Unluckily, I haven't actually been able to see it, but I've seen some videos of it just ripping across the sky, because those satellites have to be in such a low orbit to provide the type of the internet that he wants to provide the world. So you can see them so clear, and it's just amazing when you see them just zip across, and it's all in one of this crazy little line.
I did see them recently, and the first time I saw them, I knew about them being launched. Didn't know they were passing over, and it was a couple of months ago. And I remember walking the dog, coming back, and seeing this one light pop over the house, and then the second light pops over, and the third light pops over, and I was like, I got my wife, who is the most skeptical skeptic. I was like, look at that, look at that, look at that, and even she was like, that's pretty amazing. That's got to be something. And before we knew it, we had 16 lights counted, and then just. Again, even me who really wants to believe I'm seeing what I want to see, I was like, wait a second, that's not that Starlink satellite system. And I checked, and yep, sure enough, it was scheduled to be flying over the UK at that time. So
think about this. Eventually, he wants to have 300,000 of those.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of folk debating today online. A lot of folk into their astronomy. That is going to ruin basically stargazing. It's going to ruin people who want to spot UFOs, because the sky is going to be filled with basically small moving dots of light everywhere.
But on the flip side, he's talking about giving everybody free internet.
That's always a benefit. So you have to kind of weigh up the pros and cons, don't you?
Yeah.
Maybe when we get the video cameras get better and better, we'll be able to spot these things in the nighttime sky. I had one more question sent in from Eddie, and it was, have you had any moments before or after the main incident with the Princeton and the Nimitz that you've thought to yourself you might be seeing something kind of alien, otherworldly, something you shouldn't be seeing?
No.
This was the moment, this was it.
That's it. That's my 15.
Do you know what? It's not a bad 15, to be fair. Listen,
I agree.
Just before you go, Gary, I've got a quick fire couple of words.
You can ask me as many questions as you want, man. I'm
awesome.
free.
First off, just a few words or a few sentences, what comes to mind, and if nothing does, we can move on to the next one, okay?
Yeah.
So the first one you kind of touched on earlier, but just to come back to it, 'cause it's really important, that the D word, disclosure. Talk to me about that.
Well, what comes to mind is that, like I said, I don't ever think that it can come out. Disclosure gets too close to national security, even to the people that would love to tell you. That's the reason why I think that when these presidents are running for office and they say, you know what, I'm going to get to the bottom of this alien situation, and then they find out, and then they're just like, well, shit, I can't say that. I can't even talk about that. When they truly find out, what's going on, I got a feeling that, they just can't talk about it. And, whether it's, stability of our economy or stability of our security, as no country is going to admit that they can't provide 100% security to their country. And that starts and stops with classifying any information that is to the contrary to that.
Yeah, and I suppose we're seeing a bit of a taste in that with a virus at the minute, as it's kind of going throughout the world that people have been stockpiling toilet paper to kind of combat this. So the way they've reacted to this probably shows you that something like that coming out, which, let's be honest, is probably the single biggest story of all time, they're not going to react well to it. So,
no, they won't react well to it. Apparently, everybody thought they were going to shit themselves to death.
Yeah, that was the least of people's problems. But yeah, the toilet paper went pretty quickly. Next one I want to ask you, Lou Elizondo.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts?
I think he's legit. I think that he's been where he says he has, and he's done what he says he has done. Because he talks exactly like somebody that would be in that situation where he wants to be on the mainstream with it, but there's just stuff he can't talk about, so he has to prove it instead. He has to come back. It's like, if I want to talk about something about my system or something like that, I actually will Google whatever I want to talk about to see whether or not it's already out there. And then if it's already out there, I'll talk about it. And I have to just double check to make sure it's not classified. But luckily for me, all my stuff was from 16 plus years ago. So most of that stuff has already been sold off to other countries.
Okay.
So I'm good with talking about some of the systems, but there's some system specifications like frequencies and events and times and things like that, but not related to this incident that I still can't talk about. And that's what people don't understand. And the way he talks, it's kind of, I kind of feel him when it comes to that stuff, because if he really was working hand in hand with that stuff, it's like I had a buddy that was a spook, which is basically an intelligence guy. He great guy and everything like that. And when you asked him what he did, he'd say, "Yeah, I'm a spook." And you go, "Well, what did you do?" He goes, "Well, I do spook stuff."
Yeah.
He goes, "You know what I do?" And I go, "I know what you do." I go, "Can you tell me about it?" No. It's just, so it's kind of that type of situation. So if he can actually come up with the actual evidence in the civilian world for what he already knows, well, then he can move on and actually talk about it. But until he does that, I don't think he can really talk about it. And plus, if he, people that are stressing him about, wanting solid records about, his involvement with ATIP and things like that. And, here's a program that literally didn't exist until a couple years ago. I mean, it existed, but it didn't exist.
Yeah.
So they're not gonna have their roster or record of who worked there. They're not gonna. I mean, it's just illogical for me to think that the government would admit that who worked on what projects and stuff like that, and start being able to throw tracers for people to actually track down these people that worked in these projects. And poor Lou, I mean, no matter what he does, whether he's telling the truth or not, he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. The only difference is he's not making crazy, outrageous claims, and maybe not like other people in that organization, but he just got kind of stuck in that crossfire there. And him and Chris Mellon, they're upstanding guys. I mean, very intelligent guys. I mean, you can see it right in their eyes when they talk to you. I mean, and I'm not talking about that corny shit that you saw on TV. When you actually talk to them, they come off as very intelligent people, very, very calculated, very, like they know more about what's going on in your room than you do.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, well, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you exactly what I know to be true to myself, and that's it.
Yeah.
Because you probably already know more than I do. You probably investigated this situation.
I can totally get where you come from. Like with a guy like Lou Elizondo, like he can talk for hours. And I watched one of his YouTube videos. Well, not one of his, but from some conference he done last year, and it's him standing at a PowerPoint for about 2.5 hours. And at the end of it, it tells you nothing, but he says quite a lot, and it keeps you interested and intrigued the whole time. And I think if Lou Elizondo had a slogan on a T-shirt, it would be "Look at the data," because all he tells you is look at the data, and he's trying to tell you as much as he can. I see what you mean, without coming out and saying, yes, these things are alien, yes, they come from here, yes, they do this. It's like, is it not? It's almost from an area, a place of frustration, that are these things not fascinating enough just with this sample of data that you can't find that intriguing enough to take on?
It's just like when I hear people say that, enough with the Nimitz encounter and stuff like that. And I go, well, that's fine if you're bored with that. But, I mean, it's still the first time in human history that the United States government in any capacity has admitted that there are unknown objects that they track on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
I mean, that in itself, I mean, if you knew nothing about the situation, that in itself is one of the most amazing pieces of information that, 20 years ago, people doing this research, if they had gotten that, they would have been like, oh my God, that would have been disclosure for them.
Yeah. If someone told you before this happened that was going to happen, it would have blown your mind. That's too much. But
the only people that aren't happy are the ones that actually want to, see and visit and travel with aliens.
Have you got any thoughts on ultra-terrestrials and that concept or theory? It's something that Tom DeLonge's talked about.
Now, is it the theory that they're coming from different dimensions?
Yeah, potentially this planet, but different dimensions, or that there's another potential older race that are on this planet. I think it's been described as a little bit like Wakanda and Black Panther. That there could be like that whole hidden civilization that's here, something like that.
I think that if their technology was advanced enough, that they definitely could hide in plain sight relatively easy from us. Because they would probably have techniques to, alter memory and things like that. So, I mean, they could literally just run a whole operation here on the planet and nobody would ever know. So, I mean, by that, then I think that, there's a possibility of that. I've thrown around that idea. I've even thrown around the idea that, there's been there's been a whole other massively advanced civilizations on this very planet before we ever evolved. Mm-hmm. And then of course, I'm a crazy novice in physics, but it honestly, I love physics. And one of the things that has caught my interest is a lot of the advances in quantum physics lately. And, for the people that aren't familiar with, quantum physics and regular physics, they're not two different physics. It's just that, and they've been around forever. Quantum physics has been around forever. During Einstein's time, they knew about it. They just didn't use it because it wasn't as handy. Mm-hmm. Basically, if you're using, regular standard stuff, I'm trying to figure out how this ball drops, and goes across my yard, I'm going to use a standard model physics because it all works. But if I'm going to try to figure out every air molecule that moved off of that ball and then interacted with every quark that reacted with every neon, every particle, every light particle, and stuff like that, while that ball's moving through, and then trying to calculate, everything else like that, I'm going to use quantum physics. So it's more of quantifying the small rather than the big.
Awesome. What about the extraterrestrial? Where does that sit with you in this whole thing?
So now the ultra-terrestrial seems plausible for me because of my thoughts on how the universe started, and that when trying to look back on trying to figure out doing thought experiments on like how the universe came into being with the Big Bang, and I had heard a statement from a physicist saying that it could be possible that the Big Bang was basically the backside of a black hole. Basically they're saying that in another dimension that enough material got pulled into a black hole in that dimension that it actually burst into our dimension, causing a Big Bang of material.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the very moment that material started to move through this dimension, that it actually created the dimension itself. Now, for every possible direction that this material could have moved in, that's a different dimension that would have been created. And then on top of that, you're going to actually have, or not dimensions, but you're going to have parallel existences to this one. So not only different dimensions, but parallel existences too. Basically the ups and the downs. You get your first, second, or your first, second, third, all the way up to seventh dimension. I think they've mathematically proven exists, or and then,
I'll take your word on that one. Yeah.
Well, I've only read a couple of things on that right now, and then of course, there's a theory that there's multiple existences too, multiple realities. And I think that those realities come into play whenever there's a choice, whether you blinked that moment or you didn't blink that moment. Now you have two different realities. So for every micro thought, every micro inflection on your face, there was always something different you could have done, and there was an infinite amount of universes that were created at that one moment. So it's I've thought a little too far into all this, so we won't go too far into it. But from what I think could technically be possible with physics, that there's a very, very real possibility that these could come from another dimension or even a parallel universe.
So you would say less likely to be another planet, more likely dimensional?
Due to the amount of time that it would take to move around, because all right, say somebody did visit our planet and they were just there's a scientist, Kevin Knuth, that's in part of my the UAPx organization, and he actually summed it up really well in one of his lectures. Say I visit your planet and I leave. Once I leave, time is relative to your planet. It could be 10,000 years before I even get back to your planet, but for me, it could have only been, a dozen years. Mm-hmm. I come back and, evolution's taken a turn for the worst. Or, if I come here, I could have just set up camp with remote operations and then moved on to the next planet, never to come back here. But now you see the remnants of me because I left a bunch of, remote operated vehicles to track and maintain what's going on here.
I left a bunch of Tic Tacs off the California coast, buzzing about
and those
aircraft carrier groups.
Now, those are the more fantastic ideas that I've come up with, and of course, those are the ones that people want to hear. The real reality of the situation is it very well could be just our own technology that's been cartelled, our own people. Because when it comes down to it, we've seen it happen with oil, we've seen it happen with diamonds, we've seen it happen with every natural resource on this planet. Mm-hmm. It's, for the people to say that it doesn't happen with technology, Well, I'm sad to say that there's a lot of tech I've seen that it still hasn't even hit the market. Nothing fantastic. Just, it's like I remember when OLEDs finally hit the market. I saw that shit like 30 years prior.
Listen, so that's a great one. I've got another couple of words to throw at you, then I kind of finish up.
Okay.
Any thoughts on Bob Lazar and his story?
I think that there's truth there that got corrupted by media.
Okay.
And not corrupted in a way that like they twisted it, but I have a feeling that the guy had a fantastic story to begin with that got just blown up to a proportion that it didn't need to be, and I think the guy kind of felt like he had to keep up with it and something new all the time. I see a guy that something fantastic happened to, that it just got turned and twisted and changed into an animal that he couldn't control anymore. And I think that's really why he kind of went off the grid for so long, because he just couldn't control the narrative anymore. He couldn't control the story. It was just had a mind of its own after a certain point.
Totally fair. And I want to ask you to kind of summarize a little bit, where do you see things as related to this topic in the next 5 years?
I see all of us still craving for more knowledge.
Unfortunately,
and all of us waiting for the next Tic Tac incident.
Do you see anything else coming out, like, not that, as you say, the Princeton Nimitz, not that it's amazing, but do you think we'll get more released that have happened more recently? Because a lot's came out that potentially we know there's been more incidents, but do you think it will come out?
Well, I think that it definitely will become more commonplace. I think that with the Nimitz incident, that it's now going to be a little bit more mainstream. So there's been some really good push forward for this to be a mainstream topic. And what I'm really hoping for the future is real science, real scientists, people that would have just scoffed at this years ago, hopping on that bandwagon, kind of like when Einstein was trying to say that time was relative and that, you're nuts, guy, and then all of a sudden he was proven right, and everybody jumps on that bandwagon and starts riding, doing the trip to Oregon.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping that it becomes even more mainstream. I'm hoping that colleges that instead of having this under their paranormal, the few colleges that have degrees in paranormal psychology or paranormal paranormal studies, I hope that it becomes a topic that is well researched and actually brings in some more brilliant minds like Deep Facade and Kevin Knuth and people of that nature, where they're just absolutely brilliant people that have had this education that we can all wish that we had. I don't know what your education is, but mine is not as good as I'd love it to be. And then I've actually vowed to get my doctorate before my daughter graduates high school. So,
So, Gary, that's all we've got time for, but thank you very much. What we'll do is we'll make sure that the listeners have got all the links on there for UAPx. For your Twitter handle, you're always really vocal on Twitter and you chat to people, which is great. And like you say, you want to get a lot out there. The whole idea behind UAPx is getting a lot of minds together as well, and that's keeping that conversation going from a scientific standpoint, a research standpoint, and that's something that's only going to continue going forward. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for being interested. The more people that are interested, the better. I'm always up for an interview. Sometimes it's a little hard to get them, stapled down with time and date, stuff like that. But anybody that's interested in any interviews, I have no problem talking to anybody. I talk to skeptics and true believers. I try really hard not to be judgmental, but I am human, so forgive me if I am.
Not at all. It makes it all the more interesting, trust me.
Yeah, and thank you for your time. Feel free to engage with me online. Any follow-up questions you have, if your listeners want me to come back on. And I've been kind of toying around now that I got this set up. I might do some Facebook live chatting, and see if anybody's interested in anything like that. But I just try to make people feel like they as long as they engage me in a way that, if they've got questions, I'll answer what I know, and if I don't know it, well, they can piss in the wind. I don't care. But anybody can ask me any question they want. So
yeah, and I've certainly found that as well. So I really appreciate being the first guest, and I would absolutely love to have you back on in one of the shows in the coming future anyway.
Well, I look forward to it. Or if you just need somebody else on with you, or if you just want to get a group of guys together, bullshit about UFOs, I'm down for that too. So,
folks, I'm sure whether or not that's the first time you've heard that story, its impact is still incredible. I can't wait to have Gary back on again in the future, and in the bio of this download you can find all his contact details and keep in touch with all things UAP Expeditions. A lot of exciting stuff coming up there, folks. That's all for today's show. I sincerely thank you for listening. Please subscribe on whatever platform you've listened to the show, as our next episodes are going to feature more interviews following up on these incidents with more witnesses and journalists who have their own theories on what's happening with the events coming out, currently in the news, and where they could also be going. Find me on Twitter at UFO UAP AM and on Facebook at That UFO Podcast. Please like the page and feel free to drop me a message. I'm more than happy to chat all things UFO, UAP, whatever you want to talk about. With this being a brand new podcast, I can assure you week in, week out, the quality will increase and all feedback is appreciated. If there's something you want to hear on the show, have your name read out, ask a question, suggest a feature, or even recommend a guest, then absolutely please let me know, drop me a message. I'll be appearing on Paranormal Prowlers podcast. That's hosted by the awesome Tessa you heard advertised earlier on the show on the 18th of May, so please give that a listen, where I'll be sharing my own UFO experiences and sightings, some from when I was younger and one very recently as well, so be sure to listen. That is all for this week's show. Thank you very much for listening. Please remember to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. You can like, retweet and subscribe. That would all be very much appreciated. The shows are being uploaded onto YouTube as we speak more and more. You can sign up at patreon.com/That UFO Podcast to access the shows ad-free as well. Please get in touch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, That UFO Podcast. Of course, on Twitter, it's at UFO UAPAM. And again, folks, as always, keep looking up. You never know what you might see.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little Baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked to the word. Meditative game of Fateful on Meta. I can't imagine how it could have been any better. I got to the top of the stairs and there he was. Like, you awake? I was about to abduct you, cuz. I jumped back and nearly kissed myself, and I climbed out the window after the elf, and I woke up in my bed and there was something on my head and everything was weird and everything was red. And I called out to my boys. They thought this was noise. They thought it was a dream. They thought it was my toys. They thought it was my problems, and they think I should seek therapy, and I don't know what to do because it doesn't really scare me. If you really want to know who I think may be, I think it's you and me and us and we and him and her and that and she and that thing over there and what's that, Jake? If we're being serious, open your mind, consider your heart, consider time, consider your space, consider your lies, consider your life.